The moment my brother-in-law's hand slammed down on the table, the whole room went quiet. Not the comfortable kind of quiet you get after Grace at Thanksgiving dinner. The sharp, electric kind, the kind that means something is about to break. I didn't flinch. I never do anymore. His name is Derek, and he has never once in 7 years looked me in the eye when he spoke to me. He talks at me. The way you talk at a wall you're annoyed is still standing. That night, sitting at my sister's dining room table in their house in suburban Columbus, Ohio, he looked at me the way he always does, like I was something that had wandered in from outside and hadn't figured out yet that it didn't belong. "So," he said, leaning back in his chair with the particular confidence of a man who has never been truly wrong about anything in his own mind. "Still doing the hospital thing?" The hospital thing. 8 years of my life. 4 of medical school, 3 of residency in emergency medicine, 1 in a trauma fellowship at a level 1 center in Baltimore. 80-hour weeks. Patients coding under my hands at 2 in the morning. A 14-year-old boy I pulled back from a fentanyl overdose last March who sent me a card in December that said, "You're the reason I'm still here." The hospital thing. "I am," I said. My sister, Claire, passed the green bean casserole to her mother-in-law and pretended she hadn't heard the question. She's been doing that, pretending not to hear things for the entire length of her marriage. It's how she survives it. I used to judge her for it. I don't anymore. My mother reached over and squeezed my hand under the table. She knew. She always knows. Derek poured himself more wine, his 3rd glass since we sat down, and we'd only been at the table 20 minutes. "I just wonder sometimes," he said, in the voice people use when they have already decided what they think and are simply waiting for you to confirm it, if it's really worth it. All that school, all that debt. You're what, 31, 32? And you're still renting. Claire and I were in our house by 28. Claire set her fork down very carefully. "The way you set something down when you're trying not to throw it." "Derek," she said. "I'm just making conversation," he said. And that was the thing about Derek. He was always just making conversation. He was always just asking. He was always just wondering. The cruelty was never named, which made it impossible to fight directly, like trying to grab smoke. I looked at him and said nothing. I have learned, over years in trauma bays, to be very comfortable with silence. Silence doesn't scare me. It's noise that gets people killed. The noise of panic, of assumption, of people who don't know what they're doing shouting over the people who do. I ate my dinner. The table moved on. Derek's mother complimented Claire's sweet potato casserole. My nephew, Mason, Claire's 8-year-old, the best person in that house by a significant margin, asked me if I had seen any cool injuries lately, which made everyone else grimace and made me smile genuinely for the first time all evening. I told him about a man who came in with a fishhook through his thumb, and Mason said awesome with the pure, uncomplicated appreciation that only an 8-year-old can bring to a fishhook story. I love that kid with my whole chest. He was the only reason I came to these dinners anymore. Him and my mother, who drove in from Dayton every Thanksgiving and would have been hurt if I hadn't shown up. I came for them. I smiled when required. I deflected when necessary. I had a system. The system broke down after dessert. We were in the living room, Derek's territory, full of his fantasy football trophies and the enormous television he treated like a member of the family when his younger brother showed up. My sister had mentioned Cody was coming for the weekend, and I had filed that information away with the mild wariness I kept for any new variable in this environment. Cody was 26, recently back from 2 years working on an oil rig in the Gulf, and had the energy of someone who had been surrounded by the same 40 men for 24 months and had forgotten how to modulate his volume for indoor spaces. He was not cruel the way Derek was cruel. He was loud the way a dog is loud. Not mean, just unaware of what he was knocking over. He came in, hugged his brother, kissed Claire on the cheek, ruffled Mason's hair, and then looked at me with frank curiosity. "You're the doctor's sister, right?" "I am," I said. "ER? Trauma." He whistled, low and impressed, and for a moment I thought we were going to be fine. Then Derek handed him a beer and sat back down, and something shifted in the room the way barometric pressure shifts before a storm. "She works nights mostly," Derek said, in the easy tone he used to reduce things. "Hasn't really had a chance to settle down." Cody laughed, not meanly, just reflexively, because his brother had laughed first. "Yeah, I heard it's brutal." "You actually like it?" "I do," I said. "It's the work I was built for." Derek swirled his wine. Must be nice to believe that. That sentence landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water. Everyone felt the ripple. My mother looked up from her conversation with Derek's mother. Claire went very still on the couch. What does that mean? I asked, calmly. The way I ask a patient where it hurts, not gentle, exactly, but precise. Derek shrugged. Just, it's easy to love a job when you're still in the honeymoon phase. When you're not dealing with the reality of it, real doctors have private practices, families, a life outside the hospital. The ER thing is… He waved his hand. It's a young person's game. I'm 32, I said. Exactly. I looked at him for a moment. I have looked at a lot of faces in a lot of critical moments, and I have learned to read them quickly. What I saw on Derek's face was not malice. Precisely. It was something more mundane and in some ways worse. He genuinely believed what he was saying. He had built a version of me in his head untethered, behind, incomplete, and he lived in that version as comfortably as he lived in his house. It cost him nothing to believe it, and it never would. Okay, I said, and I picked up my coffee. Mason appeared at my elbow with a deck of cards and asked if I would teach him a trick. I spent the next 40 minutes on the floor with him, teaching him how to do a basic force, watching his face go through every shade of delight as it started to work. At one point, he leaned close to my ear and whispered, "You're my favorite aunt," with the absolute sincerity of someone who doesn't know yet that they're supposed to guard what they feel, and something in my sternum ached in the best possible way. It was almost 9 o'clock when Cody, loose from 3 beers and the particular boldness that comes from an audience, started talking about his rig. He had stories, genuinely good ones, the kind that come from 2 years of close quarters and real physical danger. He'd seen a man break 3 ribs in a cable snap. He'd been on deck in a Gulf storm that took out 2 pieces of equipment the size of sedans. He was mid-story when Derek's mother, a small, bird-like woman named Patricia, who I had never once heard say anything unkind, made a small sound from the armchair and pressed her hand flat against her chest. The room didn't catch it. Derek was laughing at something Cody had said. Claire was refilling her glass in the kitchen. My mother was looking at her phone. I caught it. I was across the room before I had consciously decided to move. It is one of the things that training does to you that you cannot explain to someone who doesn't have it. Your body stops waiting for your brain's permission in certain moments. Your body already knows. I crouched in front of Patricia, put 2 fingers to her wrist, looked at her face. Her color was wrong. Her breathing was shallow and a little fast. The hand she had pressed to her chest was trembling. Patricia, I said, quietly and clearly, the way I speak in trauma bays. I need you to tell me, is this pain or pressure? She blinked at me. The room had gone quiet again. A different quiet from before. Pressure, she said. It's been a few minutes. I didn't want to make a fuss. Does it go up into your jaw? Down your left arm? A pause. The arm. A little. I turned and looked directly at Derek. Call 911. Now. He stared at me. In 7 years of Thanksgiving dinners and Christmas mornings and birthday parties, Derek has looked through me, past me, around me. At that moment, he looked at me directly, and what I saw on his face was something I recognized, because I have seen it before on the faces of people who have just realized the situation is not what they thought it was. Is she? Call 911, I said again. I'm not asking. He called. I stayed with Patricia. I kept her calm, kept her still, kept her talking. One of the most important things you can do for a patient in a possible cardiac event is keep them from spiraling into fear, because fear drives the heart rate up, and the heart rate is already the problem. I asked her about her garden, which she'd mentioned at dinner. I asked her about the roses. She told me about the roses, a pale yellow climber along the back fence that she'd been tending for 11 years, and her breathing slowly steadied, not because the problem was gone, but because she was not alone in it. I heard Derek's voice in the background, tight and unfamiliar with urgency. Yes, chest pain. She's 64, my mother. Yes, someone is with her. Cody had gone completely still by the fireplace, hands at his sides. All that rig worker confidence dissolved into something younger and uncertain. He was looking at me the way people look at the one calm person in a room full of panic. My sister appeared from the kitchen doorway. She saw my face. She understood immediately. Claire is not unaware. She's just learned to look away, and in this moment there was nothing to look away from. Mason, she said quietly, taking her son by the shoulders and steering him toward the hallway. He went, but he looked back at me once, and I nodded at him. He nodded back, like we had a deal. The paramedics arrived in 6 minutes. I met them at the door, gave them my verbal handoff the way I would give one in the ER, concise, specific, relevant. Female 64, onset approximately 12 minutes ago, pressure in the chest radiating to the left arm, diaphoresis, no loss of consciousness, no prior cardiac history that she was aware of. I gave them her medications she'd mentioned too at dinner, a blood pressure medication and a statin, and I had retained them the way I retain everything a patient tells me. I told them her resting heart rate from my finger at her wrist. One of the paramedics, a young woman with close-cropped hair and steady hands, looked at me with the quick assessment you develop in emergency medicine, the one that takes about 3 seconds and tells you everything. "You a doc?" she asked. "Trauma attending," I said. "I'll follow in my car." She nodded once. "Good catch," she said, and they moved past me to Patricia. The room was very quiet. I turned around. Derek was standing in the center of his living room with his arms loose at his sides, and he looked like a man who has just been shown a map of a city he thought he knew, and discovered that almost every street was wrong. Cody was sitting on the couch with his elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. He looked up when I turned around. His face was open in a way his brother's, never as wide and a little raw, like something had been scraped off it. "You knew," he said. "Right away." "How did you know?" I picked up my jacket from the hook by the door. "Because I pay attention," I said. "And because that's what I do." Derek took one step forward. I think he meant to say something. His mouth opened. What came out was, "I didn't." "She's going to be okay," I said, because that was the thing he needed to know and the thing that actually mattered. And I am not interested in making people feel worse than the situation already requires. They'll probably run a troponin and get her on the monitor. If it's what I think it is, she'll need a catheterization, but she got lucky with timing. He nodded. His jaw worked. "Derek." I waited until he was looking at me, actually looking, the same way he almost never does. "You should know what happened tonight. Not to embarrass you." Because she almost didn't say anything. Because she didn't want to make a fuss. I paused. People die from that. From not saying anything because they think they'll be a bother. Tell the people you love that it is never a bother. That is the most important thing I can tell you as a doctor. He stood very still. He looked like a man who has just realized how much room he has been taking up. I looked at my sister. She was standing in the doorway to the hall with her arms crossed over her chest, and her eyes were bright in a way that had nothing to do with tears, or maybe it did, but a different kind. "Go," she said softly. "We'll take care of Mason. Go be with her." I drove behind the ambulance to Riverside Methodist. I sat with Patricia through triage and waited while they worked. 2 hours later, the cardiologist on call confirmed what I had suspected. A partially occluded right coronary artery. Not a full occlusion. Not yet. But close enough that the timing of that dinner, the timing of those 12 minutes, the timing of my presence in that room, all of it mattered in the particular way that medicine so often reduces to the brutal, simple math of minutes. She was going to be okay. She spent 2 days in the hospital and went home with new medications, a follow-up scheduled, and strict instructions about her diet that she would probably follow for 3 months and then quietly negotiate with herself. That is also what I know about patients. Derek texted me at midnight, while I was still in the waiting room. It was the first text he had ever sent me in 7 years. It said, "Thank you. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been there." I looked at it for a long time. Not because I was deciding how to feel about it. I have done that already. Done it across many long shifts and many hours of quiet, which is the only real place where you settle the accounts of your life. I looked at it because I wanted to read it correctly. Not as a victory, not as a vindication. Simply as what it was. A man, imperfect and small in certain ways, but not entirely unreachable, arriving somewhere new. I typed back. She caught it herself. She told me. That was brave. And then, after a moment, take care of her. He sent back. I will. My mother was asleep in the waiting room chair beside me, her head tipped back, her hands folded in her lap. She had insisted on coming and had lasted until about 11 before exhaustion won. I watched her breathe for a moment. 71 years old, still driving herself from Dayton, still showing up, still squeezing my hand under tables when no one else notices. I reached over and straightened the jacket someone had draped across her shoulders. I have a job that costs a great deal. Holidays that end in hospital waiting rooms, relationships that have frayed under the weight of schedules and silences, and the particular emotional distance that settles into you when you spend your working hours in proximity to death and have to actively work to remember that the rest of the world is not. I have missed things. I have arrived late, left early, forgotten, been too tired, been too far inside my own head. But I was in that room tonight. I was paying attention, and Patricia was going to go home to her yellow roses. That is the only ledger that matters to me. There is a version of my life that other people have drawn for me, Derek's version, or versions like it, where I am behind and untethered and incomplete, where I have missed the things that supposedly define a life. I used to carry those versions around and try them on like clothes that never fit right, wondering what was wrong with me that I couldn't make them fit. I set them down a long time ago. In a trauma bay at 2 a.m, to be specific, when I held a woman's hand while her heart restarted, and she came back into her body and looked up at me like I was the first solid thing she'd grabbed in a long fall. I set those versions down right there, and I never picked them up again. When the sun started to come through the waiting room windows, weak and pale gold the way November sun always is, my mother woke up and looked at me and said, "How's Patricia?" "She's going to be fine," I said. My mother nodded slowly. She put her hand over mine. "Of course she is," she said. "You were there." On the drive home, I filed the after-visit report I'd mentally composed during the night, the kind of report you give yourself, the internal debrief that good clinicians run after every significant case. What did I see? What did I do? What would I do differently? I saw a woman who was afraid to be a bother. I would tell her sooner, "You are never a bother. You are someone's mother. You tend yellow roses. You are the entire world to the people on the other side of that curtain, and you are absolutely allowed to take up space in a crisis." That is the thing I wish I could write on the wall of every waiting room and every dining room and every living room in America. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to know what you know. You are allowed to say, clearly and without apology, "This is what I do," and mean it all the way down. I got home just before 8. I made coffee. I sat by the window with the cup warm between my hands and watched the neighborhood come slowly to life. A dog walker, a kid on a bike, a woman in a robe getting the paper from the end of her driveway, and I thought about Mason's face when the card trick finally worked. The pure, uncomplicated delight of it. The way he'd looked at me after, like I had shown him something true about the world. Maybe I had. That's the thing about what we show children, they keep it. They carry it forward into a version of themselves we'll never get to see. I hope he carries it forward. I hope he learns to pay attention, to be in the room, really in the room, with the people he loves. To notice when someone is pressing their hand to their chest and trying not to make a fuss. I hope he learns that the most important skill anyone can have in medicine, in love, in every ordinary, remarkable moment of a life is this: show up. Pay attention. Do not look away. Everything else is secondary. My phone rang. It was Claire. "She's awake," my sister said. "She's asking for you." I set down my coffee. I picked up my keys. I went back.